Hello, I'm back. Today I'm gonna be talking about some of my favorite book series. This isn't an all-encompassing list, and some of these I don't have physical copies of the books because I either gave them to the store for like donations or to the local libraries for donations, which I kind of like come to regret, but this is just a small list. You can see a little pile right here of some of my books. They're either in a series or they're just standalone books. And the first one is a series I've been reading for a while now. It's also an anime series, and they actually only published the first 4 books in English. I believe they republished them in English, I think. And that is the 12 Kingdom series. Like, this copy is pretty beat up, I'm sorry. I think I've had this for like 16 years now, maybe. I got it back once in like 6th grade, I think, from one of my older brothers. But yeah, I own the other 3 books in this series that were published in English. There isn't like a set narrative for this series. For the most part, each of the books kind of take place in different timelines. Some of them might connect back to other books and like more like a direct sequel. You can read book 2 without really reading book 1 because it takes place like 10 years earlier and kind of deals with a different set of characters than book 1. Like, you might see some of the characters that appear in book 1, but they're kind of like side roles for the most part. And like, I've been reading this series for years. I really enjoy it. I also like the artwork. You get these really nice pieces of art. This one, all of the books have that. So yeah, I really like that. There is a little bit with like some of the character development what made sense. I felt sometimes it came on a little bit too quickly, at least some parts, but generally I was fine with it. And then after that is One Piece. Like, I've known about this series since 4Kids did the dub of it, like 20 years ago, I think, roughly. Even though that dub is pretty bad, it did get me into this series. Like, I like how real the world is. Everything makes sense in it. All of the characters I love. Generally, I think some of the later arcs suffer from being a bit too long. It's just kind of like the opposite complaint I have of stuff like Black Clover that I feel like are going too fast. Like, I think that is one of my main complaints about One Piece, because I felt like, especially the Wano arc, I felt like was going on forever, where I don't think that what was going on in the arc was all that terrible, but just the pacing of it was kind of off. Like, I like all of the powers, I like art style. I think my favorite arc is probably Thriller Bark. And I have yet to watch the live action series of that yet. I've just been kind of like putting it off until I finish watching like Elementary. But once I finish that, I'll probably get into the live action series because I think it was like pretty good. And then after that is My Hero Academia. I found this series when it had already been going for a while. I came kind of late into this series. Back in about 2018, 2019, I think. I was trying to find other anime series to watch. I was also in college, so I could watch stuff there before my classes, or like in between my classes and stuff. And so I found this, and I did kind of fall in love with it after a couple of chapters. I really do like the superhero genre, even though I do think right now I'm getting kind of like tired of it with all the Marvel and DC movies. Like, I still watch superhero stuff, but not as often because it's just so saturated right now. I do like My Hero Academia. I like all of the characters. I did dress up as Eraserhead for the Renaissance Fair couple of years ago when it was the fantasy and sci-fi weekend. It was like 90 plus degrees and I'm in all black, but I had fun. And this series I own, you can't see them myself because my new little figure is covering them, but I own not most, at least half of it, maybe, because I think it's still going on. It's in the final arc. I think, volume 30, I think, came out. It was the last time I remember that it was the one with Stars and Stripes. Or was it just Star and Stripe? But they published a volume with her in it, with her coming to Japan to help out. I think that was the last time I remember being published. I started buying them a couple years ago, I think, after I started watching the anime. So yeah, I might start reviewing this after Black Clover and Demon Slayer. Like, this is one of the other series I'm reading that is like pretty fast paced. It's not super drawn out or anything, which I don't mind in a series, but also this is one of the series that has a bunch of characters that I feel like has a hard time like focusing on all of them at once. And reading through it, it does feel like at least some of the arcs do focus a little bit on at least one or two characters kind of give them more development, which I kind of like it. But I do wish some of the characters had at least like a little bit more focus on them. But I can understand because there's so many characters in this that's how to focus on all of them like equally. Fullmetal Alchemist. Now this series, I never read the manga until like several years ago. I watched the early 2000s anime series on this that was coming out when the series was still being published, and they had to like wildly diverge from the plot of the manga, like I think it was halfway through. And then I didn't watch it for a while. At the time I didn't read the manga until later. I didn't watch Brotherhood until I think it was a couple of years after it came out. At the same time it was being published in English, I think I was reading a lot more like Naruto, Fruits Baskets, Bleach and whatnot. So I didn't pick it up until I think it was 2016, 2017, so it was already pretty over by then. Like, it's not a super long series. I do like how well it's put together. Everything in the book in the series makes sense pretty quick. I wouldn't say like quick, but I really like how well done the characters are. And I just like how the story starts out. I mean, like, with the nature of the story, I kind of wish that there was, I don't know, I want to say more time. I don't know, I'm very, like, conflicted about stuff like this, because with the Wheel of Time series, I kind of liked how it took its time to kind of establish everything before we got the Trollocs come in and find out why Moraine and land on there. But then at the same time, well, this with, like, Fullmetal Alchemist, I feel like the introduction of it is intriguing enough that even if it went by kind of quickly and kind of like, really for the most part, introduces, I guess, like the main conflict pretty early, I guess you could say. I think the author sets everything up pretty well. And all of the action and the alchemy I like. And then after that, like Clover. Like right now, all of my feelings are kind of like in the reviews. Short version is I like the characters, I really like the artwork, I like the magic system. I have some issues with the pacing and like wishing that there was more downtime just showing like the Black Bulls hanging out before jumping to the next arc. At least showing more of like because I feel like at least some of the arcs we don't see him that often. Or just see him with the Golden Dawn, because he's apparently supposed to be one of the main characters, but we never see him do anything at the Golden Dawn hideout. Except for, like, Claus and Mimosa. We don't really see that much of them except during the Capital Invasion arc. And we barely see the captain. So I kind of feel like that was a waste, where he's set up as being this all-powerful important mage, but we barely see him at the hideout. And then next on my list, Wheel of Time. I do plan on reviewing the rest of the TV series, especially since season 2 is out, which I have not yet watched because I wanted to rewatch season 1 for it. And so, Wheel of Time. I think this is one of the older copies of the book I have. I started reading this book series a couple of years ago. I would just DNF them after a while. Usually when they got to the second town after Nynaeve had followed them. Yeah, so I think I have most of them, but for some reason I never got book 8, and that was the book I'm supposed to read next. So I just finished book 7. I want to go take book 8 out, and I just realized I never bought it, even though I have all of the other ones. But I really do love this series. I do think it's one of those book series that I think just kind of like goes on for a while. I kind of wish I'd been cut down a little bit, at least by like, I don't know, at least by like 2 books. Like, stuff would be long, because there's a lot like involved in this series. But I do feel like, kind of like with like One Piece, I feel like it's going on for too long. But generally, I like Robert Jordan's writing. I like, for the most part, the characters. Like, they all make sense to me. I do like their world. I do like how everything is set up in it, and also like the magic system. I do like the fact that he included a glossary in the back, because there are times where like there will be so many name stuff being thrown out that I get confused. If I haven't read it in like a while, I might forget something of it. Which I'm also glad that like A Song of Ice and Fire also does this, because there are just so many characters and so many houses and stuff that I have a hard time remembering everyone. Next is actually the first review I did on this channel. on a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. I think I mentioned in that video that I found this book in my local library and I just picked it up. Most of what I said in the video still stands right now, but I do like the art. I like all of like especially like some of like the background stuff I really like. I think I showed some of it in the view with the team going to the staircase and you see all of the landscapes and the ship is so tiny compared to a lot of it. I really liked it. It made it seem like huge, like compared to the ship, because the ship isn't super tiny. It's like a pretty good sized ship since it fits 5 people and a cat, and they apparently have a bunch of stuff on the ship. So it's not tiny, but the landscape makes it seem so much tinier. And I do wish that there's maybe a bit more detail, at least for like the character models, because sometimes I get confused. I generally like the characters. Like I do think that, I mean, there are maybe like a couple of things that I wish were expanded on, which I think I mentioned in the review, like the world building. Like we get mention of some stuff that I kind of wish we had seen more a little bit, but also I kind of feel like it adds to the world a little bit with the stuff happening outside the main character's view. Not last on my list, but last of the physical books I have is The Night Circus. And so this one, again, I just picked it up in my library after I seen a bunch of other YouTubers talking about it. And like, while I do think the back cover is a bit of an exaggeration, I do like the plot of this series. I like the writing style. While I do think it's very flowery and a little bit over the top at times, I do kind of think it fits with the aesthetics it's trying to go for, because it takes place in a circus where like the aesthetics is very important. Like I think the beginning of it was at least intriguing enough for me to continue reading it. And generally I like the side characters. I like the idea of a night circus. Like it seems like the kind of circus I would want to go see. And I do like the setting because it takes place in like the later Victorian era. Most of it takes place in like the 1880s, 90s. There's a couple of sections that take place a couple of years later, in like closer to like the 1900s. And so I don't think I've read this in a while. I think it's been a little over a year maybe I read this. And then the 3 other books I mentioned that I don't have physical copies for are Sailor Moon, Fruits Basket, and then Naruto. And start with like Sailor Moon. Well, I do have it all on my Kindle. I came pretty late to the Sailor Moon series. I only started reading about a year ago, because growing up I never really read that many or watched that many shoujo anime or manga series. I think the only one I really watched was Fruits Basket when like the old anime was on. I think it was during the early to mid 2000s that series came out. I think I watched most of the anime series when it was on. I owned some of the copies of that series, but other than that, I really didn't watch that much. Sailor Moon I always knew about, but I never started like reading or watching it until like pretty recently, within last like I said year. And I do like all of the characters. I like the story. I like all of the powers, the mythology, and the worlds she created. And like I have seen some of the anime. I think I've read the manga series at least twice now. I'm probably gonna try and read it again soon. Next on my list is Fruits Basket. I already talked a little bit about this before, but I did watch, like I said, most of the anime series and read some of the manga. I had some of it when it was being published by Tokyo Pop, but then I think Fruits Basket was the first like major shoujo series I ever read and watched. So yeah, I do want to get back into Fruits Basket because like I haven't read in a while, but it is one of my favorite series that I did like rereading. Like I do like Toru Honda. I really like their friends. Like I did find copies of it in the library near me, and I was rereading it, and I do like the friendship between her and her 2 friends from school. I thought it was a pretty positive portrayal of female friendships. Like all 3 of them really cared about each other. They were pretty protective of her. They watched out for her, and she did the same thing for them. So I thought it was a pretty great friendship. And I also like the Soma family too. I thought they were all pretty well done, and the conflict and everything I thought was pretty well done. And then last on my list, at least for now, is Naruto. I love that series a lot growing up. I just rewatched most of part 1. I got up until all of the filler in part 1. I remember watching all of part 1 when it was on TV. I watched all of the filler. Like, it was very weird for me to come back to it after reading a lot more, like, modern manga. I think generally it was just very much like a product of its time and being like a very, like, influential manga. I think that's everything for now. Peace.